Okay, this is a sunny day, but we can only do, I think, less than half an hour. Then my daughter will have a lesson, online lesson. Then we need to stop. This is good. We can do it, even a little time. And then I think we can pick up other more time after she finish her classes. But she has whole day classes, maybe later. And I draw picture. I draw something. Then I need to do those drawing homework. Then yes, great. Let's begin. Don't chat too much. But I like to chat to myself. Like I I always say, oh, we what we that's we reading. Like talk to my soul. Do you know Gollum in Lord of the Ring, the Gollum? He always say, we are us. Yeah, this thing called us. We want to do what? Eh, you know, one yourself, one soul. So we, let's do it. It's so funny. It's so interesting. Life is interesting. Yesterday, we read here, Philip, his restless mind avid. Philip, his restless man avid for new things, became very devout that it was possible to join a Bible league and wrote to London for particulars. This consisted in a form to be filled up with the application's name, age, and school. A solemn declaration to be signed that he would read a pet portion of Holy Scripture every night for a year, and like every day, and a request for half a crown. This, it was explained, was demanded partly to prove the earnest, uh, earnestness earnestness of the application's desire to become a member of the league, and partly to cover clerical expenses. Clerical, clerical, clerical 教士的 clerical expenses 教士 clerical expenses. Can you read for me?
Clerical.
Yes, clerical.
Clerical.
Clerical expenses. Philip duly sent the paper and the money. Duly. 及时 哦 it's duly 及时的 so in time 及时 on time okay. Philip duly sent the papers and the money, and in return received a calendar worth about a penny, on which was set down the appointed passages to be read each day, and a sheet of paper on side of which was a pointed message to be read, on which was set down the appointed passage to be read each day, and a sheet of paper on side of which was a picture of good shepherd and a lamb. I really don't understand why we are lamb for the God. I don't know. And on the other, direct, directively framed in red lamb, a short prayer which had to be said before beginning to read. A short prayer which had to be said before beginning to read. Every evening he undressed. A short prayer which had to be said before beginning to read. Okay, uh, a short prayer, just like I say something before I read. Now I put things, along I read. Every evening, he undressed as quickly as possible in order to have time for his task before the gas was put off. He read industriously. He read industriously, industriously, as he read always without as he read always without criticism, stories of cruelty, deceit, ingratitude, deceit, ingratitude, dishonesty, and low cunning, actions which would have exercised his horror, actions which would have excited his horror in life about him. In the reading passed through his mind without command, because they were committed under the direct inspiration of God. Every evening he undressed as quickly as possible in order to have time for his task before the gas was put off. He read industriously, as he read always, without criticism, stories of cruelty, deceit, ingratitude, dishonesty, and low cunning, actions which would have excited his honor in life about him. In the reading passed through his mind without command, because they were committed under the direct inspiration of God. The method of the league was to alternate a book of the Old Testament with a book of the New. And one night Philip came across this word of Jesus Christ. If you have faith, you doubt not. You will not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also you shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, cast into the sea, it shall be done. Okay. If you have faith, and doubt not, you not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also you shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all this, whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive. They made no particular impression on him, but it happened that 2 or 3 days later, being Sunday, the Canaan in resident chose them for the text of his sermon. The Canaan in the resident chose them for the text of his sermon. Even if Philip had wanted to hear this, it would have been impossible. Even if Philip had wanted to hear this, it would have been impossible. For the boys of King's School sit in the Troy, and the pulpits stand at the corner of the transept, so that the preacher's back is almost turned to them. The distance also is so great that it needs a man with a fine voice and a knowledge of a elocution to make himself heard in the Troy key of oh no uh, 唱诗班唱诗班 CH choir yes choir okay choir I know it's but always don't know how to read it. They made no particular impression on him, but it happened that 2 or 3 days later, being Sunday, the canon in residence chose them for the text of his sermon. Even if Philip had wanted to hear this, it would have been impossible. For the boys of the King's School sit in the choir, and the pulpit 学生讲坛神职员 and the pulpit 神职人员 and the pulpit神职人员 OK pulpit 神职 stand at the corner of the transept 应该是神坛呐、或者是 what's this 十字OK yes 教堂的十字形的翼部 stands at the corner of the transept. Is it transept? Transept, so that the preacher's back is almost turned to them. Preacher, 传道牧师 The preacher's back is almost so that the preacher's back is almost turned to them. The distance also is so great that it needs a man with a fine voice and a knowledge of elocution. Elocution. 朗诵法、发音法、演说艺术。Knowledge of elocution. 演说艺术。A fine voice and a knowledge of elocution to make himself heard in the choir. Into long usage of canons. I can just 教规教式 canon the canon usage of canon of Tercanbury are chosen from their learning rather than for any quality which might be of use in a cathedral church. And according to long usage of the canon of Tercanbury are chosen for their learning rather than for any qualities which might be of use in the cathedral church, but the words of the text, perhaps because he had read them so short, but the word of the text, perhaps because he had read them so short, so came clearly enough to Philip's ear, and they seemed on a sudden to have a personal application. He thought about them through most of the sermon, and that night, he turned over the page of the gospel, the gospel, and found once more the passage. Though he believed implicitly everything he saw in print, he believed implicit 暗示，毫无疑问的，绝对的。implicit believe
implicit
无疑的，绝对的。Though he believed implicitly everything he saw in print, he had learned already that in the Bible things that said one thing quite clearly often mysteriously meant another. There was no fuss at school, so he kept the question he had in mind till the Christmas holiday, and then one day he made an opportunity. It was after supper, and prayer was just finished. Mrs. Curry was counting the eggs that Mary Ann had brought in as usual, and writing on each one the date. Philip stood at the table and pretended to turn listlessly the pages of the Bible. Pretend to turn listlessly the page of the Bible. I say, Uncle William, this passage here, does it really mean that? He put his finger against it as though he had come across it. He put his finger against it as though he had come across it accidentally. Mr. Curry looked up over his spectacles. He was holding spectacle. 哦 spectacle 是眼镜啊 spectacle. Spectacles. Looked up over his spectacles. Yeah. He was holding Thames in front of the fair. It had come in that evening, damp from the press, and the vicar always aired it at 10 minutes before he began to read. What passage is that? Why, this about if you have faith, you can remove mountains. If it says so in the Bible, it is so, Philip, said Mrs. Carey gently, picking up the plate basket. Really? Philip looked at his uncle for an answer. It's a matter of faith. Do you mean to say that if you really believe you could remove mountain, you could? By the grace of God, said the vicar. Now, say good night to your Uncle Philip, said Aunt Louisa. You are not wanting to move a mountain tonight, are you? Philip allowed himself to be kissed on the forehead by his uncle and preceded Mr. Curry upstairs. 跟着吧 ，precede 不是跟着先语 precede and
precede,
precede 先语 and preceded Mrs. Curry upstairs. He had got the information he wanted. His little room was icy, and he shivered when he put on his nightshirt. But he always felt that his prayers were more pleased to God when he said them under condition of discomfort. The coldness of his hands and feet were an offering to the Almighty. And tonight he sank on his knee. I remember this. He wanted his foot to be cured. He would have a normal foot. Yeah, I think that's it. Bury his face in his hand and pray to might, or all his might, that he would make his club foot whole. Yes. It was a very small thing beside the moving of mountains. He knew that God could do it if he wished, and he next morning finished his prayer with the same request. He fixed a date for the miracle. Oh God, in the loving mercy and godness, if it please make my foot all right on the night before I go back to school. He was glad to get his petition into a formula. Petition, 祈祷 petition 请求 petition to get his petition into a formula, and he repeated later in the dining room during the short pause which the vicar always made after prayers. Before he rose from his knee, he said it again in the evening and again, shivering in his nightshirt, before he got into bed. And he believed. For once, he looked forward with eagerness to the end of the holiday. He laughed to himself as he thought of his uncle's astonishment when he ran down the stairs 3 at a time, and after breakfast he and Aunt Louisa would have to hurry out and buy a new pair of boots. At school, they would be astounded. Hello, Carrie. What have you done with your foot? Oh, it's all right now, he would answer carefully, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. He would be able to play football. His heart leaped as he saw himself running faster than any of the other boys. At the end of the Easter term, there were the sports, and he would be able to go in for the races, and he rather fancied himself over the hurdles. What hurdle is? Hurdle, not hurdle, hurdle. 障碍呀，障碍物。Hurdle， 障碍赛跑。
hurdle,
障碍赛跑。障碍赛跑。He rather fancied fancied himself over the hurdles. It would be splendid to be like everyone else, not to be stared at curiously by new boys who didn't know about his default, uh, deformity, know about his deformity, know at the bath in summer to need incredible precautions. While he was undressing, before he could in the water, he prayed with all the power of his soul. No thoughts assailed him. He was confident in the word of God, and the night before he was to go back to school, he went up to bed tremulous, with excitement, went up to bed tremulous, 敏感的 tremulous 发抖的 tremulous with excitement went up 颤抖的敏感的胆小的 tremulous with excitement 颤抖的还差不多颤抖的 He went up to bed tremulous with excitement. There was snow on the ground, and Aunt Louisa had allowed herself the unaccustomed luxury of a fire in her bedroom. But in Philip's little room, it was so cold that his fingers were numb, and he had great difficulty in undoing his collar. His teeth chattered. The idea came to him that he must do something more than usual to attract the action of God, and he turned back the rug which was in front of his bed so that he could kneel. Oh my God. He turned back the rug which was in front of his bed so that he could kneel on the bare board. And then it struck him that his nightshirt was a softness that might displease his maker. So he took it off. Oh my God. And said his prayer naked. When he got into bed, he was so cold that for some time he could not sleep. But when he did, it was so soundly that Mary Ann had to shake him when she brought in his hot water next morning. He talked to him while he drew the curtains, but he did not answer. He had remembered at once that this was the morning for the miracle. His heart was filled with joy and gratitude. His first instinct was to put down his hand and feel the foot, which was whole now. But to do this seemed to doubt the goodness of the God. He knew that his foot was well. But at last, he made out of his finger stairs just as Mary Ann was going into the dining room for the prayer. And then he sat down to breakfast. You are very quiet this morning, Philip, said Aunt Louisa presently. He's thinking of the good breakfast he will have at school tomorrow, said the vicar. When Philip answered, it was in a way that always irritated his uncle with something that had nothing to do with the matter in hand. He called it a bad habit of wool gathering. Let's stop here. Okay, we'll read. It's so